If thermite was the key to the conspiracy, then we need to observe how thermite burns and destroys as well. And in the New Mexico desert, that demonstration is about to begin. There are many questions surrounding 9/11 that have provoked conspiracy theories. The sudden collapse of the Twin Towers has perhaps been the most controversial. Although a search of the remaining beams and columns from the Twin Towers have found no evidence of an explosive reaction, some truthers are adamant that the towers were brought down by a controlled demolition, and these explosions were observed by eyewitnesses.
One eyewitness was standing among a crowd of people on Church Street, 2.5 blocks from the South Tower, when he saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed.
Professional demolition teams use a shape charge made from a C4 explosive to cut steel and send buildings crashing into their own footprint.
So this is a commercial product, so basically you just apply it. Wherever you put it at, it's going to start firing. It's going to fire molten metal directly into the column and go right through it like it wasn't there.
An explosion sends a stream of molten copper cutting through the steel. But the real evidence of any demolition job is in the aftermath. Columns in the World Trade Center debris did not have the distinctive cut of a shape charge with its permanent copper residue.
I don't see any pictures where I see columns that have been cut like this. I see columns that are broken, I see columns that are cut with a torch. I don't see anything like this in any of the pictures I've seen.
Charred detonators and other telltale signs were also absent in the World Trade Center cleanup. But truthers believe dust residue New Yorkers sampled from across Lower Manhattan after the attacks point to the real instigator of the collapse.
What I found last year was in the dust these chips that were red on one side and gray on the other side. And I had access to a scanning electron microscope, and sure enough, there was in the red side iron and oxygen, implying an iron oxide, and aluminum, the ingredients for thermite. Then we look in the literature and compare, and sure enough, the fellows at Livermore National Lab, I'm not saying they're implicated here by any means, but they describe a material that has all these elements. It's a very high-tech form of thermite called super thermite.
Thermite may not be a household term, but every year countless American children play with it in its common form, the sparkler. A compound of aluminum and iron oxide. Once ignited, it burns at 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel. Although truthers blame thermite for these sparks flowing from the South Tower, Thomas Eager says there are other, more logical explanations.
It's possible that you could get a shower of sparks from a thermite reaction because molten aluminum reacting with something is essentially a thermite reaction. But you can't tell whether that aluminum came from a melting of the airplanes in the fire or a controlled demolition.
Was thermite the main cause of the building collapse? Once again, there is a way to find out. Emertech calculated a controlled experiment to see if thermite was a viable option in the collapse of the towers.
Today we're going to be going through a column that's only 8 inches by 6 inches by about ½ inch thick. So compared to the World Trade Center columns, it's really puny, and we're still using over 100 pounds of thermite to try to burn through it. To get thermite to burn into metal, you have to hold it in place and let the heat transfer into the metal. So to put it on column, you have to build something that will hold this basically molten metal against the column long enough for it to do some good.
The demolition team designs a four-sided flange and welds it onto the column. Since thermite is not explosive, it must be held in tight contact with the column until it heats up enough to melt the steel. Clay is added to the flange and the welds to protect them from the heat and focus the melting action on the column.
You want to talk to him when we get back?
The thermite is not going to explode. It's not going to cause a boom. What you're going to see is basically a fire. It's going to be a much slower process.
The team scaled their experiment to see if the steel column, somewhat smaller than those in the World Trade Center, could be sheared with 175 pounds of commercial-grade thermite. If thermite melts through this steel column, the theory of a thermite-controlled demolition may have some validity. While the truthers insist that more explosive super thermite could have been used in the tower demolitions, testing conventional thermite can illuminate this physical process and answer a simple question. Can thermite of any type burn through steel beams?
Lining of clay wasn't a total success. You can see where the clay broke off. But it looks like most of the material just basically boiled out, and we did not get that heating action that we wanted on the column.
Despite 175 pounds of thermite packed around the steel column, it remained undamaged. Our results seem clear. If thermite can't melt this small column, it wouldn't have had a chance to melt through the much larger columns in the Twin Towers.